Hello and welcome to our Lakeside chat. We are David Wofford and Katie Noonan, co-chairs of the Rotary Nature Center Friends. And we're so happy that you can join us tonight.
As we begin our program, it is important for us to acknowledge that we are on stolen land, that Lake Merritt is part of Ohlone territory. We hear now from Corinna Gould, spokesperson for the Confederated Villages of LaShawn and co-founder of Segurate Land Trust.
Good afternoon, relatives. My name is Corinna Gould. I am the spokesperson for the Confederated Villages of LaShawn. We are here today at what most folks think of as Lake Merritt. We are in the territory of Huichin. Huichin is actually a territory that encompasses 6 Bay Area cities: Oakland, Berkeley, Alameda, Emeryville, Albany, and Piedmont. And so this is a place that my ancestors have been since the beginning of time. And this was a place of abundance. I'm so happy that people from all walks of life that now come into our territory can enjoy this beautiful place that my ancestors have enjoyed since the beginning of time. My relationship to the land that I have been born to, raising my children and grandchildren here, has been to tell the story, the truth of what happened on this land before other people came here. I'm hoping that as we begin to learn these lessons of fires in California, the pandemic that's happening, that human beings come back to living in reciprocity with the earth.
Thank you, Corinna. That is such a powerful presentation, and I encourage everyone to check out our playlist to hear her Lakeside chat that she gave in August, I believe it was. And we're really thrilled that the Segurate Land Trust is going to be stewarding land in Joaquin Miller Park from now on. So welcome, everybody. We're really thrilled that you're here and want to share with you, as we normally do, at the beginning of our show, some of the highlights of our month. Some are kind of represented by my background that I chose tonight, which is related to, in fact, our topic of Lake Merritt as being a wetland and having all this rich diversity of life that supports special species like the sea otters did in the past and may in the future. I'm going to share my screen now. Highlights of the month. We're going from the end of August, really, until the current time. And we had many highlights this year. As school began to start, we were working with groups of students who are located in the area of Lake, able to come to Lake Merritt to participate in stewardship and activities. And here we are working with students from St. Paul's Middle School in Glen Echo Creek. Yes, in Glen Echo Creek. And the students started at the cemetery, which is partway up the Glen Echo Creek watershed, and walked down and tested water quality, which is one of the things that we're interested in taking care of otters. So that was a highlight, and they found that the water quality that they said was interesting and not too bad. So that can be shared at a later time, and you can ask me if you would like, but they collected actual data. We also shared, had the loan of a professional sonde so that we could get accurate data. It was really very cool. The other highlight that I'd like to share with you tonight is that dissolved oxygen in Lake Merritt, which fell, as we can see, to 0 in late August, and then had a surge, is now is above the minimum level of 5 parts per million, which is one of the things that made Lake Merritt an impaired water body, according to the PTA. So the recovery of dissolved oxygen was a really highlight of this last month. And this involved, another highlight was the involvement of a variety of people interested in loving the lake. We have our co-chair, David Wofford, out with Janai Southworth from the Greater Farallones Foundation. And we have we have people from the city, from the Lake Merritt Institute, and from Lake Tech all out to take a look at the water quality. And in our next one, you can see that they, for a short time, they put out a water quality buoy in Lake Merritt to follow the water, oxygen especially, and just documented the recovery. Another key highlight for us, the involvement of students in testing for toxic phytoplankton. So this has become a weekly thing. We have high school students who are collecting plankton samples according to the California Department of Public Health protocol, sending them in and getting feedback as to what kinds of organisms are in. And so far, they have not found any hazardous ones in the lake. So it's great to involve kids in real science and helping to protect the lake. Here we have our Creek to Bay Day, which was a wonderful event on September 17th. We tidied up the Rotary Nature Center grounds. We brought in a number of volunteers, only some of whom are here, to take a look at organisms that were in the lake. And we found fish had returned to the lake on the 17th of September. We have long-jawed mudsuckers, a native fish that was found in a fish trap and returned immediately to the lake, documenting at least some recovery. We have other organisms that are colonizing the lake right now. These are organisms like these sea anemones that are coming in the Lake Merritt Channel. And we have just recently had the visit of some Chinook salmon that came into Lake Merritt. And as they did last year, they did not find a suitable spawning stream, but they sure tried. And that's a really interesting event and something to think about, and think about how we can provide a welcoming habitat for all species, including humans, at Lake Merritt. So I'm going to stop my share here now. We're delighted tonight to have Megan Isidore. Megan was the co-founder and is now the executive director of the River Otter Ecology Project. And she's also the deputy continental coordinator for the International Union for the Conservation of Nature and Species Survival Commission in the Otter Specialist Group. And one of the reasons we moved for our talk from the first Friday was Megan is so busy carrying out all of these important jobs. And so she's, before founding the River Ecology Project, she worked for many years on endangered coho salmon and recovery projects in Lagunitas Creek. And she learned a lot about watershed ecology that way. And she has other interests as well, which include painting, sketchbooking, and also travel. So I am so thrilled to present our guest. And Megan, are we ready to start?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Hi, everybody. I'm going to share screen now. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here, and thanks for having me. Lake Merritt and Oakland are big favorite places of mine in general, and they're especially favorite of otters, not especially Lake Merritt, but it turns out that river otters are surprisingly urban animals. And that is exciting news for all kinds of reasons. And I'll tell you a little bit about that now. But first of all, I want to mention that the river otter story in the Bay Area and beyond it's all about connections. It's about connections among land and water, weather, other species, humans, the whole web of interactions that makes up our planet. As an ecologist and a conservationist, I follow the pathways and I spend my time exploring the web that connects all of us to support our planet's health. We are very grateful to be connected to you through Zoom today, and sometimes in person, and through our mission, which is to support watershed health, connecting otter health with watershed conservation, and with restoration through community science, research, and education. We're most of all grateful to the Coast and the Bay Miwok, the Wapo, the Pomo, and the Ohlone tribes for stewarding the unceded land we live in and work on, and for their soul-deep understanding and for upholding those connections through millennia. Those are the kinds of community connections that we try to honor and we emulate. So once upon a time, there were river otters all over the Bay Area. By the 20th century, otter sightings became less frequent and then disappeared completely in a lot of places. And otter decline is happening to most species all over the world. Throughout the world, there are 13 species of river otter throughout the world, and only North American river otters, these guys you see here, are not endangered, threatened, or in danger of becoming endangered. So the decline is happening by loss of wetland habitat, by trapping and pollution, and it's no different here. But our story tonight is about the unexpected return of this charismatic predator. They're a species whose presence is a hopeful sign of relatively healthy watersheds. And it's about how a lot of people paying attention to what's going on in our own backyards, like Lake Merritt, can literally change maps, which changes management and changes planning, and that changes the world. And we can all participate in that. So studying the otters led us to questions about their recovery and how it might affect our shared watersheds and what their presence can tell us about the state of watersheds. Now, this all started because I live in Marin County and I was working in Lagunitas Creek for many years on coho salmon recovery. A lot of you may know that coho salmon are really, really in bad shape in Marin and in California in general, and on the West Coast in general. And as I was working in the creek, I started seeing otters, as did my co-founders. And we thought we were seeing them more often, but we weren't sure. We didn't know much about them. And when we looked into it, we saw that there was very little known about them in the Bay Area. So we decided to fill in that data gap as best we could and do that by using their charm to advertise and popularize their return, to link river otter return to cleaner watersheds, and to back that up with select research. And I'll give you a just brief background. Historically, our species, Lantra canadensis, were present throughout North America. But trapping, pollution, and loss of wetlands sent them to local extinction or extirpation in many areas. But in 1970, the Clean Air Act passed for the second time. In 1972, the Clean Water Act passed, which is the primary federal law governing water pollution. And then we had local positive change in 1974 with the Don Edwards National Wildlife Refuge in the South Bay. And that was our first urban national wildlife refuge. And keep urban in your mind, because that's important. And it was dedicated to preserving and enhancing wildlife habitat. So protecting migratory birds and threatened and endangered species, and providing, of course, opportunities for nature recreation, which we know more and more how much we need. These are two of the many changes that paved the way for pollution control and for watershed restoration. Habitats became more livable for otters and other wildlife, and many places throughout the country began reintroduction of river otters. However, that's where our story changes a little bit and takes a jump, because here in the Bay Area, river otters were not reintroduced and tracked, and no one really was paying a lot of attention to them from about 1914 until we began our project in 2012. Otters had been known historically throughout the Bay Area, but their numbers had dwindled probably not as affected by fur trapping, although they were somewhat affected by that, as by pollution. There was no major effort to track them, and they were not considered endangered or threatened in the Bay Area at all. However, this map that you see on your screen now was the map available the year we began in 2012. The pink area is considered River Otter Range. And as you see, there's not much around the San Francisco Bay that was considered Otter Range. We knew that there were in creeks and bays in Marin County, and we figured they were probably in other places as well. So we started 2 projects to gather information. One is Otter Spotter, which I'm talking about today, our crowdsourced community science project. And the other is a focal research study area in Marin County. It's about 100 miles along the coast and bay and reservoirs. And there we began to monitor population changes and began baseline diet and genetic studies. And those are ongoing now. The Otter Spotter project began as a regional Bay Area project. We were really just looking for where the otters were around San Francisco Bay, but it's been amazingly fruitful. And we've spread out significantly, including all of California and sightings from all over the United States and into Canada, and even some from other countries, which is really fun. So this is how we began, with a web portal to input sightings and a lot of outreach. So this page that you're seeing is our web portal where you can submit your sightings. You can look at the sightings map, which we update a couple times a week. You can look at the new range map, the old range map, and the changes. There's field guide, field etiquette, and how to identify a river otter. Is it a beaver? Is it a river otter? Is it a muskrat or a seal? Those are all photos of all those animals we get into our Otter Spotter, and we love them all. So please do input your otter sightings. Don't be nervous if you're not sure if it's an otter. We will help you figure it out, and we love that. We also have an interactive story map. You can see that on the page in blue, and you can click on that page and get into our story map, which tells you a lot of what we're talking about today. It's in English, it's also in Spanish now. So that is the beginning. This is how you input an otter sighting. It's really easy. You can do it right on your phone. You just go to our website, click into the Otter Spotter segment. You can pin the map right there. It asks you a little bit of information. And the information it asks you, the identifying info, is mostly so that if we're not sure or you're not sure it's a real sighting, we can check in with you. The main thing to remember when you're inputting an otter sighting is that you need to zoom in as close as you can on that map on your phone, which can be a little tricky, but most people are able to do it with no problem. But zoom in as close as you can, because otherwise the sighting shows up as somewhere way far away that we don't know where it is. And then we email you. So avoid emails from us, and all is well. So next, this is the Otter Spotter map that we have on our website. All of those yellow dots are river otter sightings. All of the red crosses are sightings of dead otters, which we really encourage. It's really important now. Most of those dead otters are roadkill, but we have partnered with California Department of Fish and Wildlife and with the California Academy of Sciences to salvage those dead otters whenever we can. And we do that because we do wildlife autopsies, otherwise known as necropsies, to find out what's going on health-wise with the otters. And we find there are some interesting findings there, but the most interesting one, the most telling one, and the most important one really is that we have found low levels, very small levels of rodenticides in several otters. And what that's telling us is that either The otters are grabbing animals that have rodenticides within their bodies and eating them. And river otters will eat pretty much any meat they can get their teeth around, or the rodenticides are in the water. Neither of those are good things. About 99.9% of the otters are killed by getting hit by cars. And that's because they're small animals, they're dark, and they dart across roads between the water and the uplands. So we do collect that information, and we do share it not only with the agencies I mentioned, but also with the California Roadkill Observation System, which is a group out of UC Davis. And they collect car strike information, not just on otters, but on all species of animals. And it helps inform policy and management and financial investment in reducing roadkill. It's a wonderful organization. They use that data to study how and why roadkill occurs and what we can do to reduce it. So we share with them as much as we can. So if you look at this map, you see in the North Bay, there are lots and lots of sightings. And as you go south into the South Bay, the sightings really get fewer and fewer. And you'll see some blue dots on this map in Sunnyvale, in Santa Clara, Campbell, Los Gatos, all of those areas, and then up into San Mateo and Redwood City. And this is really interesting to us because we've been doing this for 10 years now. We have about 5,500 sightings have come in, and we are pretty sure that we know where the otters are in the Bay Area, certainly, and beyond a lot as well. And all of these blue sightings down here in the south are blue dots because we don't have photos and we can't be entirely sure that those are otter sightings. A lot of people see all kinds of animals and think they're otters. So if there's a place where we're seeing otter sightings, but we don't already know there are otters there and there's no photo or video, then we put them in blue because they're not necessarily sightings, but we hope they are. And the interesting thing is that south of San Francisco, there's all kinds of good otter habitat from Pacifica on south into Santa Cruz and Half Moon Bay, and they're all of their historical range. But as far as we know now, there are no otters there yet. And we're wondering if they started recovering up in the North Bay, are moving into the South and East Bay, and sooner or later, we hope that they will move over to the coast. The more otters, the better. Otters love coastal areas. They can get all kinds of food along the coast. They're very happy hunting in the water, in the near shore, as well as in lakes and rivers. So they're quite coastal creatures, and they're very happy in salt water. They need fresh water, unlike sea otters, which don't need any fresh water at all. River otters need fresh water to drink and to clean their fur, but they're perfectly happy to go out into the ocean and hunt those big fish. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So here is the new range map. A couple of years ago, in 2017 or 18, we submitted our data set from our otter spotter sightings from all the kind people who sent in their sightings. We submitted it to the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and they changed the range map for river otters because of that. And they added 4,100 square miles of otter range. And all of the burgundy color on this map is the new otter range in California. The San Francisco Bay Area, as you can see here, here's this sort of weird purpley color here is San Francisco Bay. The whole Bay Area is now within official river otter range. And of course, that includes Lake Merritt, where in 2013, very early in our project, a river otter was seen in Lake Merritt for the first time that anyone I ever talked to had ever heard of. So that was really exciting, and it was very wonderful for us. And we wondered, as I'm sure you're all wondering, are river otters going to start hanging out in Lake Merritt? And we were a little bit concerned about it, mainly because of the famous Sutro Sam river otter in San Francisco, who had showed up in early 2013 at the Headlands in San Francisco at a seat, and he had hung out in GGNRA there for a while, for several months, and people were beside themselves. They couldn't believe it. They were so excited. It was so wonderful to see this otter floating around in Sutro Bath, what used to be Sutro Baths. And they brought their dogs and they threw fish to it, and they were worried about it might be lonely, so they sent their dogs in to swim with it. Never a good idea. So it became a little bit of a problem. It was also the first year of our project, so it was pretty great for us because we got to be out there and do a lot of education about river otters and talking to people, and that gave our project a big boost. But we were a little concerned when we saw this otter show up in Lake Merritt, because again, it's a very densely populated city. We were concerned about how the otter would do, if people would be excited about it, would crowd like they did in San Francisco. But that otter seemed to hang out not for very long, just maybe a few days, and then it headed back into San Francisco Bay. And since then, I think we've only had 1 or 2 sightings in Lake Merritt. It's very little. And I think part of that reason is because, as we mentioned earlier, Lake Merritt and it doesn't necessarily have great fish in it all the time. And it's also very, very crowded and very urban, and perhaps not as welcoming as it could be to river otters. So we move on. This is another view of our range map. These maps these range maps that are crowdsourced from Otter Spotter only really show us one thing, and that's where we know there are river otters. Because they're crowdsourced, because we depend upon people just noticing an otter and putting in their information. They're not, we don't go out there every year and check all these places. People just send in their information. So it's, so the fact that we don't have a sighting doesn't mean there are no otters there. It just means it hasn't been sent in to us. So the thing about crowdsourcing and community science that I both love and hate, but mostly I love it, is that as time goes on, if you keep getting the word out and keep talking to people and people keep sending in their information, you can end up with a pretty robust set of data, which is really important for us. So one of the things we're really interested about, in which I mentioned before, is that we're interested in the southern range of river otters. They used to be all the way down to Santa Cruz and Monterey, and they aren't now, as far as we know. But we do get these sightings, and there are other ways to figure out whether there are otters in these places. One of them is using eDNA, which is sampling water and finding out what DNA is within that water, what animals are in there. And that's a pretty new technology, and it's really interesting, and it's something that we're very interested in working with. Another very interesting way to look for otters is by having detection dogs who are trained to smell otter poop and can go out into an area and tell instantly, or way, way faster than we can. We walk along or we kayak along and we look for otter scat, and we use our noses too to sniff for it, but it's nothing like detection dogs who can get out there and figure it out much more quickly. So those are 2 possibilities that we can use in the South Bay as time goes on and figure out exactly how far south those otters are. So I'm going to move into, now you know what Otter Spotter is, and I want to talk about who cares. Why do people care? So we've updated the map. We know that there are lots more river otters than we thought they were, but why does that matter? What does it matter for? And river otters are really important. They're top of the food web predators. They're medium-sized predators. They're about the same weight as a big raccoon. They weigh about 15 to 25 pounds. They're long and slender. They're about 3.5 feet long, 3.5 feet long, but they're very slender. They have small heads, and they are vulnerable to environmental contaminants. That's really important. And of course, they're going to be affected by climate change and by sea level rise, just like all of our wildlife is. So understanding otters' current range, as well as the changes that happen during the next decades, can help provide us with a measure of changing watershed conditions. So the kinds of people who need and want to understand river otter range include those who work with natural resources, with restorations, toxic spill response, wildlife rehabilitators, the wildlife crossing folks I mentioned earlier, wildlife disease surveillance, fire, and advocating for our shared watersheds and wildlands. And I just had to show this photo because this is an otter. I was going to say a raccoon. This is an otter that we call Mrs. Fierce. She lives on Drake's Bay, and she's a very, very successful mother and hunter. She has a few pups every year. Her pups always do a great job. And she goes out into the bay, into the near shore, and she gets large creatures like this guitar fish. She has also been known to catch a gray smoothhound shark, which is a shark that's bigger than she is. But she went out there, she caught it, she pulled it in. There was a big fight in a culvert between her and the shark, and she came out dragging half the shark. She had eaten half of it. She dragged the other half back to her pups. So river otters really are very, very fierce predators, and they eat all kinds of meat. They're carnivores, but they're not choosy carnivores. So part of the reason that restoration folks need to know what species are in their areas is because when you're doing a restoration, a lot of times those restorations are geared toward an endangered species. So it's very, very important to know that there's a big predator like a river otter hanging out there. And one example of that is that in Redwood Creek, which runs through Muir Woods and comes out at Muir Beach, there was a beautiful, fabulous restoration done there some years ago, and that was geared toward coho salmon. The coho salmon are barely hanging on in that creek, to the point where the Department of Fish and Wildlife takes all the baby salmon that they can get their hands on. They take them to a hatchery, rear them in the hatchery so that they'll have a chance. They bring them back when they're ready to spawn and put them into Redwood Creek. Well, when you have a predator like a river otter who wants nothing more than one of those big fat salmon, you need to know how many otters are there. Where are they seen? Do we know that they're there? Are there a lot of pups? And so on. Thankfully, in that creek, there's mostly only 1 to 2 at the most otters. And we communicate with the fisheries folks and let them know where we're seeing otters so that they can give those salmon who come back the best possible chance. Another example of that is a job we had for a couple of years out in Martinez, which was really fun. The Martinez Martina's sanitary district was doing a big restoration in their sanitary ponds, and it involved draining both of the ponds. Now, a big group of otters was using those ponds, going back and forth all the time. They had healthy babies. They were a great group of otters. So they came to us and they said, let's figure out how we can keep those otters safe while we do this restoration. And it was such a great project because they were great project partners. They cared very much and they took very good care. So before their project even started, we did a survey. We looked at how otters were using the area. We gave them advice on how to keep otters safe and away from the heavy machinery. It was a several-year project. I'm really happy to say all the otters did great. They continued to use the area. All of the little changes that we made to divert them from dangerous areas worked out. None of the pups were lost. They continued to have pups and bring them back and forth the whole time. So those are some of the reasons that we need to know where otters are when we are doing restoration projects. Another reason to know what wildlife is in your area is because they are, as I mentioned, they are predators. So up here on the top left, we have some coho salmon babies. Some of the most adorable animals I've ever seen are baby coho salmon. To me, they're just little tiny bundles of possibility. They have such a hard row to hoe, and so few of them come back after to end up their life cycle and have eggs, that the ones who return are truly the heroes and heroines of the watershed. And the second one down here is a tidewater goby, also an endangered species. Now, river otters will eat anything that is not vegetative. They have very high energy needs because they are mammals that hunt in cold water. Especially here, our water is not warm, and they need to have a lot of food to keep their energy levels up. So they're not picky. They're going to take whatever is slow and easy to catch. A lot of times that's crayfish. A lot of times that's our invasive signal crayfish red swamp crayfish that are an invasive species. So, for example, in Martina's, they eat almost only red swamp crayfish, which is great. They keep those numbers down, maybe. They also eat the invasive green crabs. So again, we like to know what the otters are eating and where they are, so that we can start to understand those food webs. And the reason I love this slide, because we worked with Tamales High School students on a prey study for a couple of years, and they learned a lot and we learned a lot. We had so much fun. And I know you all do a lot of education as well. It's so great to do hands-on education with students of all ages and really get them to understand that they can be scientists. Yeah, we scientists are not all people who sit in front of our computers all day, although there's quite a lot of that, but we're also out in the field. We're doing really fun stuff. And science isn't scary. Science is fun. It's adventure. It's mystery. So we do a lot of that with our students, and it's one of our favorite things. However, back to those maps. Toxic spills happen all over the place, and it's not just oil tankers. This map shows the orange here with the ocean blue, and the yellow is oil tanker traffic coming into San Francisco Bay, and it goes way up into the estuary and even down south into San Francisco, and of course Oakland, Vallejo, all of those areas. And river otters, like all wildlife, can be harmed by oil spills. When the Costco Busan oil spill happened back in, oh gosh, I think it was 2008-ish, we weren't aware. Nobody was aware that there were river otters in Marin, in the Bay Area. So there was all that Oops. So there was all that oil spilled in Marin, and there was no plan for river otters. There was nothing prepared for them. So understanding where otters are, again, all of these little purple things are river otter sightings on here. Understanding that there are river otters in all those areas, really important for the folks who prepare for spills. And again, all of these green lines here are rail lines, and the spill folks are responsible not just for ocean spills, but also for rail spills. So they're very happy to have information about what species are within their purview. Wildfires. This is an old map from September 2020. I haven't had the heart to update it because it just gets worse every year. But as you can see, there are wildfires all over. And as we all know, wildfires are all over. They're here with us. They're not going away. All of those yellow dots, again, otter sightings. All of those red crosses are mostly hit by car otters. And you see where all the fires were. Not only do fires kill and displace wildlife, but they pollute the air and the land and water and food sources that the wildlife depend upon. Understanding how and where otters are and how they move during and after fires can support better understanding of how to support corridors. And corridors are really important. I'm sure you all know, there's a lot of talk about wildlife corridors as we take up more and more space, and as wildfires and other disasters happen. Wildlife needs a way to get away from places. So we need to have corridors to support their continuing to be viable populations. So finally, not finally, one more thing, because I can never stop talking about why it's important to know where river otters are. We do a lot of advocacy for wildlife. So we advocate for good management decisions and for all of the decisions that about corridors, about wild spaces, about what places need to stay wild, about pollution, and all of those sorts of things. And in order to effectively advocate, we need to know where the otters are. So I'm going to move on a little bit from the map and talk about urban otters. I love this video because it shows an urban person with an urban otter who's doing what otters do. And he is doing exactly the right thing. He's got his dog in his arms. He's not letting his dog chase the otter. The otter is doing its thing. He's doing his thing. And that's what we would like to see everyone in urban areas do when they see a river otter. Just sit quietly and enjoy it. So one of the things that has struck us is how comfortable river otters are in urban areas. We are seeing them all over the place. They're in all the cities. They're in Oakland, as you know. They're in Berkeley. They're in San Francisco. They're in all over Marin, Napa, Sonoma. All of our cities are terribly vulnerable to climate change and to issues that come from climate change, like sea level rise and pollution of land and air and water and more. We have begun recently, now that we've figured out where the otters are, we said, okay, what's next for us? We like to do new things. New initiatives excite us. So we started a program this past year called Otter Ambassadors. And we're going into neighborhoods where that are urban, where there are otters and people are noticing them. And we're helping them to understand and to really connect to their watersheds. And we're hoping that we can help people to really enjoy standing up for their watersheds, becoming stewards, becoming advocates on their own. So that's a new project of ours. We like it very much. We're having lots of fun, and you'll be hearing more about that. If you sign up for our newsletter, which you can do on the homepage of our website, you'll get more information about that project and the others. So our goal with that is really to use Otter Presence to connect urban communities to conservation planning, to goals, and to outcomes. So with that, beauty. I want to show you some videos of otters, because that's really what we're all here for, and that's what urban otters are all about. This is a very urban otter. This girl is in the Contra Costa Canal. Look at that canal. Doesn't look like you would see a river otter in that canal just thriving. The otters thrive there. It's connected to the Carquinez Strait, and you saw that huge striped bass that she carried into the culvert. River otters are really smart animals. They're very, very capable of learning to use our cities just in the same way that raccoons or coyotes, fox, other animals are able to navigate well in our cities. So if we give them a little bit of what they need, like nature will come back. So this is a positive story, and there are not that many positive stories to hear right now. So I like this one because they are using, in the canal, they're using this ladder as a play toy. They love the ladder. They hang out on them. They're just like a bunch of kids playing on a jungle gym. And you see how much people love them. Otters. And this is really why we started the Otter Ambassador program, because people get so excited, and we love to be out there among the people talking about otters. So we have brochures that we hand out in Spanish and in English, and this winter we're going to get some new languages as well, because so many people are really enjoying them. Look at that group, beautiful. And this one I like because it's an interaction between a bobcat and an otter, and you'll see why in a moment. Listen, do you hear that peeping? That's otter sound. So guess why that otter chased the bobcat away? You'll see in a second. Here they come. They're pretty big pups. This was at the end of October in 2018. Their pups were probably about 6 or 7 months old. But river otter pups stay with their mothers for about a year. Or they're probably about 8 months old, actually. Something like that. They stay with their moms for about a year, and they're not entirely dependent at this point. They can catch their own food by now, but they still stick around with their moms for a while, and their mothers are very, very protective of them at all times. River otter dads don't have much to do, if anything. They have really nothing to do with the pups. They disappear, and the mothers bring up the pups. Now, this is really interesting. River otter mothers will often bring up their pups together with an adult daughter or an adult sister. That we call them helper females. And sometimes groups of otters will bring up their pups together, which is interesting. This video is really fun because this is two groups of otters who know of each other, but they don't know each other well. They're not related, but here they are meeting. together and being very, very interested in each other. And that's pretty typical of river otter behavior. Unlike giant river otters who are super territorial and will kill otters not in their direct families, our otters are, yeah, they're pretty neighborly. And rather than fight a lot, they will avoid each other if they don't want to be around each other. It doesn't mean there are never fights. There are fights, and they're extremely fierce animals when fighting, but they just don't do it often.
Megan?
Yes.
Yeah, these are just beautiful. And I wondered if we could pause a minute and we have some great questions in the chat. And people
sure.
Questions.
Absolutely. Yeah, let me look at the chat.
Yeah.
One sec.
Let's see.
Okay, here I see one. From David, sea otters eat 25% of their body weight in food every day. River otters a little bit less than that, somewhere between 17 and 19%, but it's still a pretty big percentage. They need a lot of food. Thank you, David.
So,
oh, sorry. Did you want to go on?
Are there any other questions? We're a small group. If you would like to raise your hand and unmute, you would be able to do that. Okay, so let's see. Ask your questions in chat, though. That makes it easier for us to locate you. So let me go to that view.
I was just going through the chat questions.
Great, yeah.
So Janice said she and her family visited Monterey Bay in September and saw fewer otters. Those otters in Monterey Bay are not river otters. Those are sea otters. And we have two species of otters in North America, sea otters and river otters. So sea otters are really different from river otters. They're much, much bigger. They weigh 67, well, really 75 to 100 pounds. They're huge. They don't look it because we're usually far away from them when we see them, but they're very big animals. And river otters weigh between 15 and 25 pounds tops. They're really quite small animals. However, they're very fierce.
Yeah, but there were so few of them this year. I was wondering why. Not that you should know about every type of otter.
Well, I don't know that. I don't know. Did you hear that there were fewer, or did you just notice fewer?
I just noticed fewer.
Okay.
We go the same time each year.
Yeah. So sometimes any group of animals can move around, and they may have just not been there at that time. I haven't heard. I was just at a conference where I talked to one of the sea otter people, and she didn't mention that there were fewer this year in Monterey at all. So you may have just not seen them on that day. Do river otters compete with sea otters? That's a really good question. They can, and if they do, then river otters would swim away quickly because they're not about to mess with their very, very large cousins. River otters are very smart animals. And while they are fierce, and I have video of river otters chasing off 2 coyotes at once who wanted to share food with them, sea otters are very, very fierce, just like river otters, and they're not going to mess with them. So they'll back off. Does anyone else have questions before I move on?
Charles is asking about links to a newsletter.
Oh, yeah. Just go to our website, www.riverotterecology.org. I can put it in the chat. Hang on. I think I can. Yeah. And then you can sign up for the newsletter right on our homepage. And we're also, of course, on on Facebook, on Instagram, on many of those things. Twitter, although we're not very active on Twitter. But Facebook and Instagram are the two main social media that we're on. Question, do river otters still eat endangered red-legged frogs? River otters eat anything they can get their teeth around. They don't care if it's endangered or not. So if they find them, they will eat them for sure. We did, in our prey study, we didn't find a lot of frog remains. Not that we would necessarily find frog remains, but we did not find any frogs in our prey study. But that was a limited study. So they will eat frogs and newts and insects. They eat a lot of insects, aquatic insects. They eat birds. They eat rodents. They really eat any meat that they can. They actually eat pelicans, which really surprises people a lot because pelicans are very big, but river otters grab them by their feet. The pelicans put their necks down to figure out who's grabbing their feet, and they drown them. It's pretty awful, but it's really very, very interesting as well, because in Abbott's Lagoon, which is one of my study sites, they have been dining on the pelicans a lot, and vultures are out there and sharing with them, and the coyotes. The coyotes will actually go out into the water at Abbott's and drag the pelican carcasses back in and eat that, which is really interesting, and I've never seen that remarked on before. So much more. There's a lot to learn about otter diet. So Sarah asked, nothing eats them. They are top predators. They're pretty top predators, but of course, some animals do eat them, like mountain lions, and coyotes will chase the young, and bobcats will chase the young. That's why you saw that mother otter chasing that bobcat away. Because if, just like it's a wild world out there and everyone's looking, excuse me, for a bite to eat. Patty mentions that newts are so toxic. Yes, they are. And this is really kind of awful, but river otters peel the newts before they eat them. It's really dreadful, but that is what they do. What functions does play have? Play has similar functions with most mammals. It helps them learn to hunt. It develops their social skills, all of those sorts of things. It helps them understand what's in their surroundings. Rob, I'm going to talk about geese in a few minutes. You'll like that. So, Patty, I don't know about newt internals, but what I have heard from newt folks who know a lot more about newts than I do is that the peeling would render them non-toxic to otters. But now let's look a little bit more at this video because it's one of my favorites. There's a mother literally dragging her very young pups up a very steep cliff. And there's the helper female hanging out behind to make sure she grabs them if any fall. That's a very steep cliff. That's at Sea Ranch. And someone took that video. And I love that because it shows how social and how careful river otters are. They're very, very smart animals. They're smart, like raccoons are smart, like all of our urban wildlife is very smart and knows, and they deal with things in ways that a lot of times I think, they're more understandable to humans because they do things that are similar to what humans do. Like newts do things that newts understand. But river otters, you see this happening and you think, okay, I can see what's going on there. Doesn't mean we're always right. There's lots of research that we need to do to understand a lot more about river otters and their sociability. But I really like them for that reason. We have to watch this one more time. Look at her pulling that pup up the cliff. And the reason they're doing this is really interesting too, because river otters usually have their natal dens where they have their young high up above water level. And that's because during spring floods, if the baby otters get caught up in floods, they can't swim when they're young. Their mothers need to teach them how to swim. So, so they usually keep their young up high where they don't get flooded out until they're old enough to swim.
Megan?
Yes.
Hi, this is David, and I've got a really interesting question to myself. You were talking about the smartness of the otters and the raccoons, and also and the way they have sort of begun to survive in our environment. And you mentioned that the river otters young stay with them 8 to 12 months.
Mm-hmm. Or sometimes longer.
I wondered, in our world, in our society and culture, we've had our environment changed, and now young people stay with their parents much longer than they used to. It's a thing now because of the changes in our outer environment. And I wondered if the same kind of thing could happen and begin to happen more rapidly with animals in our environment, where they could get that kind of, like, our environment could change, and then they would be staying for 3 years instead of 12 months.
Oh, that is such an interesting question. And I don't have a ready, quick answer for that. But what we know about river otters and all animals and all wildlife, including us, is that we change according to the changes in our environment. So if there are changes, then river otters are among the most adaptable of animals that I've ever seen personally. They're extremely adaptable. So they can be perfectly happy in only fresh water. They can be happy in salt water. They don't care what they eat as long as it's not vegetative. They eat any kind of meat. They will move. They easily move from place to place if they need to. The youngsters, if there's enough food in the area, they'll stick with their moms, especially the females. They'll stick around with their family for years. But if there's not enough food, they'll move on. So very, very adaptable, just like humans.
Wow, thank you.
And I'd like to take, this is wonderful. I'll convey our thanks and just what a wonderful time we had with Megan. I'd like to finish off our program with a few slides and some thoughts about what's coming up next with Rotary Nature Center Friends. And so I'm going to share my screen briefly, and also how you can watch this program and other programs on YouTube and in other places. So are we seeing? Yes. So thank you all for coming. We have a program in November on the 4th. I'd like to let everyone know that you can see recorded programs on the City of Oakland's TV station, KTOP TV, on Sundays from 6 to 7 p.m. Yeah, there's a collection of new programs and also of older programs that you can watch. So coming up, we have on tomorrow, actually, our Adopt a Spot Workday. We'll be working at the Sailboat House and in the vicinity of our marsh area. And you're welcome to join us there between 10 and 12 noon. I wanted to thank all of the Otter spotters amongst us. I wanted to acknowledge Peggy, who's, I think, was in our audience. Mitch has a video that I'll put in the post chat letter so you can see a video of a fish. I think an otter, I think, it's actually ate a fish in that video. from Lake Merritt. And so we have also coming up on November 4th, a follow-up to our coverage that we had of the fish kill in Lake Merritt. And we've invited Jim Irvin of the UC Davis Fish Trawls to come and tell us about his perspective and about the fishes that inhabit the bay and the coast of California. But interestingly, the terrible fish kill did not reach into the South Bay, although the organism that caused it did. And so he's going to be exploring that. It's an area that's of mystery and something for us to learn about in the future about how we can manage our interaction with our coastline better. We also have a in-person event on October 29th. It's going to be a bio blitz. This is an in-person event where people collect objects with their iPhones and post them. The question we're asking is, after that harmful algal bloom, are there any survivors? And you can look at anyone can look at the a naturalist site and locate the all the species that have been found. So the answer to that is, of course, yes. But how soon will a full, robust ecosystem return to Lake Merritt? That's an open question and something very interesting to me, and I think a lot of people. We'd like to thank our producer, Rob Lamone, for media and the videos from our side from this program. David Wofford and I are co-chairs of Rotary Nature Center Friends. And Kristen Furman does art and design for us. Dr. Janice Lord Walker, you met in our trivia program. And there are many other volunteers. We would like very much to thank our donors. If you like what we do, please consider making a donation. It will help us keep our program for young people and for adults through our on-site events like the BioBlitz available and up to standards here. We'd like to encourage you to join other programs that take care of the lake, including the Lake Merritt Institute's cleaning program, which you can join every Tuesday or Saturday morning to help clean the lake. And like our mission as the Rotary Nature Center Friends is, of course, to bring nature and people together, for all the people of Oakland to support the Rotary Nature Center as an interpretive center for everyone. We do bird watching, nature walks, plant identification, planting and weeding, and testing the lake water with young people, but also with everyone who is interested and wants to come by and help us out, take care of our lake, and learn more about our natural world. So I want to thank all of you for coming, and we can continue to discuss and ask questions. Thank you so much for staying.
Sure.
Continuing. This is really wonderful.
Sure. Let's have a few more questions. Oh, that's a good question. Joy wants to know about encounters between otters and a person swimming in the otter's water. Could the otter incapacitate the human? Yes, that does happen on occasion. It's not, considering how often humans and otters come into contact in the water or on the water or around the water, it doesn't happen often. And when it does happen, we hear about it on the news. It happened, I think, where was it? It wasn't Yellowstone. It was, well, it does happen in Yellowstone on occasion, but it happened, I think, somewhere in California in the past couple of years, where an otter bit a person. And usually it's because the person is swimming around where there are young otters. It happens in the summertime when the otters are young, and female otters are very fierce. You don't want to mess with an otter ever. So yeah, that can happen. But in general, it doesn't. I know lots of people who have swum around with otters swimming around them and just being curious. I would be uncomfortable with that. But I think it's really great when people and wildlife can have interactions that are just completely relaxed and fine, and it's great. So the otter at Abbott's, Jeff, is a river otter. And yes, we have noted, Katie was asking about drought effects. And while I answer that, I'm going to turn this video on because it's really fun. So this is a harbor seal and a river otter. So the drought effects that we have noticed, oh, actually, I have a video about that, and I'll talk about that during the video. This is an otter who had caught a gull, and you can see him with the gull on the rocks. And here's a young harbor seal. He's very interested. Harbor seals are so shy with humans, and that's why I really love this video, because I kayak a lot to our kayak in sites, and I see harbor seals all the time, but they're so shy, and I'm just crazy about this, because here's this young seal who's really fascinated by the otter. Such a fun interaction. So I'm not going to go through the whole video because it's kind of long, but in the end, you see what happened. They swam around together for a little while without causing harm to each other, and then the river otter left its gull there and it headed back up the river. This was at the mouth of the Russian River in Jenner. Very fun. I'm going to stop this and move on in the interest of time. This is one of my favorite series of photos. This is at Abbott's, again, my site, and I go there all the time. I know all the animals there pretty well. And the river otters and the coyotes have definitely a connection. They know what each other are doing. They watch each other. Here the otters had cached a bunch of coots. They had killed some coots and cached them in the lagoon. And the very wily coyote had noticed and started going down there. And why is that not going? I don't know why that. And decided that it would share and started pulling coots out and eating them. And here's the matriarch of the group. Look how little she is compared to that coyote, but she wasn't having it. And she ended up chasing him right away. And that's pretty typical. Coyotes are really smart animals, and they're happy to share food or not share, but take food from other wildlife. But they know how fierce river otters are, and they're not going to mess with them if they don't absolutely have to. Same with this bald eagle. Again, at the mouth of the Russian River. And the coyote had caught this big fish. You see that fish down there, and had brought it up onto the rocks. And and the bald eagle thought he would share. And the coyote and the otter wasn't having it. Look at that otter. Look at that strength and musculature on that animal. They're very small. They're very lean, but they are pure muscle. And look at the big claws on him. He's not having it. He's like, no, get out. He chased him up onto the rock. There he goes. And that eagle is much bigger. I love that. The coyote, I thought river otter. And stay gone. I think of him saying, and stay gone. Get out. So here, someone had asked about geese. The one animal I don't think river otters will really mess with very easily is geese, which interests me greatly. So here's a picture of an otter just running past a bunch of geese. He's not going to mess with them. I don't know what the deal is there. I want to find out, though. I have a lot of questions about that, because river otters have no trouble killing pelicans, and they do it all the time. But I have never seen a river otter go after a goose, although I have heard of it happening. So I don't know. And here's a sea otter and river otters. The sea otter is the big one in the back, and you can see how big he is compared to the river otters. This was this was out at Chimney Rock off Point Reyes. And every so often a sea otter will swim back and forth at Chimney Rock and then disappear. And this time the river otters happened to see that otter out there and they converged upon him. They were so interested. They didn't come too close, but they surrounded him and stayed with him and swam around the point with him. And then those 3 little river otters returned and the sea otter did not. So I think he swam on and the little otter said, okay. So next, why is this not happening? Oh. So another question is about Katie asked about the drought. That is really interesting. The drought effects, we have noticed them. We have a study site at Point Reyes that we have been working on for a couple of years now. And last year, because the streams are drying up so quickly, and the river otters, and not just the river otters, but all the wildlife in the areas are being squished into places where they didn't necessarily get squished into before because there were more streams all over the place. Streams are drying up, they're drying up faster. That means that the wildlife is closer together. So for the first time, 3 of the otter pups were killed last year, and we believe they were killed by coyotes. There were coyotes there. They were all using the same water source. The 3 pups were back and forth with their mother, and one by one, they disappeared. And something got them. I suspect coyotes. It wasn't necessarily. That's just my suspicion from watching them all at this time. So that was really sad because most of the river otters usually do very well. Anything else? Any other questions before I play my very last little video? Okay, I'm just.
Yeah, there was one that says, are males more as apt to defend as females?
Oh, no, because river otter males deliver the sperm, and that's pretty much it for their parenting. After that, they are not invited, actually. They sometimes will kill baby otters. Mm-hmm. And so the mothers don't want the males around. Once the otters are older, the males and females interact a little bit more. But for the most part, male river otters interact with adult males. You can see big groups of male river otters hanging out together, which is pretty fun. And females hang out with females. Other than that, other than mating, they don't really hang out much together. Although sometimes they do. You know, the big thing about otters is that they're very adaptable. And whenever I think I know something about them, I see something else happening that is not what I thought I knew. So that's one of the fun things about studying them.
Ooh. We have a great question from Allison about baby otters. Do they have a short hairless period?
They have a pretty long helpless period. They're not really furless. They have fur when they're born, but they're pretty helpless. Their eyes are closed when they're born, and they can't swim. So until they're about 2 months old, when their mothers start teaching them to swim, they're really quite hopeless. Yes.
But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Life in the Northern California watershed is a shared proposition. The system is complex and easily unbalanced. Once believed to be extinct, the return of the charismatic river otter, ambassador of our watershed, is a beacon of hope to encourage continuing wetland restoration and conservation. Balancing this fragility is the responsibility of us all.
I love that. Many thanks to all the folks who made that beautiful video for us. It's our favorite. And thank you all so much for being here tonight. I'm going to sign off now.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you so much, really, and so appreciate it.
Thank you. Please feel free to email or be in touch with us, and hope to see you again.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye now. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.